Mark and his wife Jessica were enjoying a few drinks on the patio of their spacious suburban home. At 42, Mark, an accomplished accountant, had climbed the ranks to become the vice president of his firm. The luxurious house they lived in was a testament to the financial success he had achieved. Jessica, an attractive 26-year-old brunette, looked even younger than her years, thanks to her strict fitness and diet routine. Her figure could easily belong to someone a decade younger. Her most striking features were her full bust and her long, slender legs. Jessica had been a primary school teacher, but as Mark's income grew, she decided to leave her job. While Mark found their sex life very satisfying, Jessica didn't share the same enthusiasm. Things had gotten better for her when they delved into the world of open relationships the previous year. Even though, as Jessica mentioned, the guys she met weren't particularly memorable, the frequency of their parties had started to dwindle, and that was what tonight's conversation revolved around. "I don't get it," Mark said, puzzled. "First, Sarah and Bill stopped coming. Then it was Marie and Jim. Now it feels like we hardly ever meet up." "Yeah," Jessica agreed. "It's frustrating, but I think I've figured out why." "Really?" Mark asked, raising an eyebrow in surprise. "Yeah, I think so." "So, what's going on?" "Well," Jessica hesitated before continuing, "the other day, I had coffee with Marie. It turns out that the action hasn't really stopped, but some of our friends have started exploring something different." "What do you mean by something different?" "I'm not quite sure how to put it," Jessica continued, "but it seems that some of the women have started finding our usual gatherings less thrilling." "You've got to be kidding," Mark said, astonished. "No, I'm serious. I know you guys love it, but Sarah was looking for more excitement and found something new." "What kind of excitement?" "Well, it's a different type of party where couples and singles mix and you get a wider range of ages," Jessica explained. "So," Jessica went on, "Sarah told Marie about it, and that's where they've been going. They say it's the most thrilling experience they've ever had." "Who are these singles that show up?" Mark asked, curious. "Oh, usually younger folks, who are smart and attractive. I think that's what makes these parties more appealing." When Mark came back with fresh drinks, Jessica took a sip, crossed her legs, and let out a quiet sigh. "What's on your mind?" Mark asked. "Oh, nothing. Probably just had a bit too much to drink. And it's been a while since we've had one of our parties, so I'm curious." "Do you want to go?" Jessica's face lit up with excitement. Everything was turning out to be even easier than she had imagined. A few days later, Mark and Jessica had their friends, Marie and Jim, over for dinner. It was a late Saturday night, after a candle-lit meal, where the topic of parties didn't come up once. Now, as they relaxed in the warm summer night air, with wine loosening their thoughts, their minds drifted to more intimate matters. Mark, for his part, found himself once again admiring the stunning Marie, a 29-year-old blonde who worked as a paralegal at a top law firm in the city. It was Jessica who steered the conversation towards the Circle group. "So tell me, Marie," Jessica began, "what do you think about the Circle?" "Oh, it's fantastic. We really enjoy it, don't we, honey?" she said, glancing at her husband, Tom. "Yes, dear," he replied, though his enthusiasm seemed a bit more restrained. "Are you both thinking about joining us at a Circle party?" she asked, looking between Mark and Jessica. "Well, I'm not sure," Mark admitted, "but it sounds like it might be worth checking out. It's definitely a unique experience." "Why do they call it the Circle?" Jessica's eyes widened slightly, signaling Marie to proceed with caution. "Well," Marie explained, "the couple who host these events have a massive house out in the countryside. On their terrace, there's a large circle, about 5 yards in diameter, drawn with yellow chalk. When a couple arrives at the party, they're each given a collar with a lock and a plastic bracelet with the key to the lock. While one partner is enjoying time with someone else, the other wears the collar, which is then locked. That's the signal to head out to the patio, sit in the circle, and wait there until their partner comes to retrieve them. The system works well. It ensures privacy and spares everyone any awkwardness." Jessica relaxed, satisfied with Marie's explanation. The evening wrapped up without Tom expressing any particular opinion about the parties. About half an hour after Marie and Tom had left, Jessica and Mark returned to the patio for a nightcap. "Maybe we should give one of these parties a try?" Jessica suggested. "I suppose," Mark began. But the whole circle idea sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? Plus, we wouldn't know most of the people there. Jessica added, I think it could be interesting to attend one, just to see what the crowd is like. We don't have to participate. We could just have a drink and decide if it's not our scene. Maybe. The next day, Jessica called Marie. Her friend was quick to ask, So, are you guys coming to the circle party? I hope so. I just need to help Mark warm up to the idea. Listen, just suggest that he takes you to one of the parties. Once you're there, join the cuckold circle and finally experience real sex. Your Mark will be dying to know everything, and his curiosity will drive him crazy. He'll soon be eager to entertain a real man in your home. And when he sees it with his own eyes, he'll be putty in your hands, in every way possible. The two women burst into laughter. You know what I really enjoy? Marie asked. What's that? Thinking about the guys from our old group who slept with me, and imagining them ending up in a cuckold circle for everyone to see. Once Mark is there, you'll have the upper hand in all your relationships. I'll talk to Mark tonight. Great. The next party is this Saturday, so what do you say? Maybe we should drop by and see what the hype is all about. If it's not our thing, we can always leave and catch a movie instead. Yeah, why not? If Tom and Bill went, it must be worth it. Mark had mixed emotions. Jessica had always had a strong libido. He wasn't entirely sure about this whole open-swapping relationship, but he had to admit it had turned out to be quite thrilling for both of them. On Friday evening, Mark and Jessica attended their first circle party. Jessica was thrilled, but Mark was full of doubts. I'm really not sure about this, he said. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm sure everything will turn out just fine, Jessica reassured him. Yeah, well, Mark continued, just remember, we don't have to do anything if we don't want to. It might just be a chance to see what it's all about without actually getting involved. As if that's all it would be, Jessica thought to herself. About half an hour later, they pulled up to a house that could easily be mistaken for a mansion. The landscaping was pristine, with large torches illuminating the front yard. How do I look? Jessica asked, turning to Mark. Stunning, Mark replied earnestly. He could tell Jessica had really put effort into getting ready that night, her sexiest dress with a daring slit, the highest heels she owned, a fresh trip to the salon, and a new perfume. Just the sight of her made Mark feel a tingling excitement. His thoughts were interrupted as the door opened. Standing before them was a striking woman, around 40 years old, with dark hair, tall, and dressed impeccably. Hello, she greeted them warmly. You must be Jessica and Mark. Please come in, I'm Rachel. The foyer was dimly lit, with soft candlelight enhancing the ambiance. From another room, the sounds of quiet music and murmured conversation floated through the air. Jessica, Rachel said, turning to her, you're just as beautiful as Marie described. I think you'll be a wonderful addition to our little circle. Mark noticed that the hostess was directing all her attention toward his wife, not him. And here, Rachel continued, handing something to Jessica, is your circle necklace and the key to the collar. Jessica slipped the necklace and chain into her purse and fastened the plastic bracelet with the key around her wrist. Come with me. I'll show you to the bar. Marie's already here and eager to see you. Perfect, Jessica replied as she and Mark followed Rachel into a large, dark-paneled room. The space was actually a vast library, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a roaring fireplace. A bar was set up at one end. Mark noticed that the bartender, a man in his 40s, was wearing the same type of collar that had been handed to Jessica. Rachel caught Mark's curious gaze. He's wearing the collar, so he takes turns serving everyone who's sent to the circle and helps out with a few other things during the party. Got it, Mark said, nodding. At the bar, a young man in his 20s stood next to an attractive blonde who looked to be in her 40s. Your champagne, ma'am, the bartender said, placing a glass of sparkling wine in front of the woman. And your scotch, sir, he added, handing the drink to the man. Mark found the bartender's politeness a bit unusual. He and Jessica ordered white wine, which was promptly poured and served with an impressive efficiency. Here you go, ma'am, the bartender said, placing Jessica's drink on a napkin before her. And here's yours, buddy, he added, sliding Mark's glass over. Buddy? Mark thought, somewhat taken aback. What's that about? Very courteous, Mark remarked to Rachel as they headed toward the open doorway leading out of the library bar. Of course. It's all part of the tradition of good manners and politeness that we uphold at our gatherings, Rachel explained. They walked through a seating area that was also softly lit. In the corner, a couple sat on a sofa, whispering to each other. From there, they entered a vast room that could only be described as a party room, or perhaps an enormous family room. The space featured 5 distinct seating areas, a small bar in the corner, a dance floor, and plenty of sofas scattered among potted trees. The ambiance was further enhanced by candlelight and soft music. One side of the room had French doors that opened out to an outdoor patio and a beautifully lit pool. About 20 people were mingling in the room, most of them gathered in small groups. "Jessica!" came a familiar voice. "Marie." "Marie, hi!" Jessica replied as they hugged. "I'm so glad you're here. And you too, Mark," she added with a warm smile. "Where's Tom?" Mark asked, hoping to find someone he knew well. "Well," Marie said with a knowing smile, "he's actually out on the terrace, in the circle." "You mean," Jessica started. "Exactly. Hold on. I'll introduce you. Don't move." As Marie walked away, Mark wrapped an arm around Jessica's shoulders, but she gently shrugged it off. When Marie returned, she had a handsome young man, probably around 20, with her. "Wow," Jessica whispered to Mark. "Jessica," Marie began, "this is Mitchell. Mitchell, meet my best friend Jessica." "Well, well," Mitchell said with a slow, approving gaze as he looked Jessica up and down. "All of Marie's friends are stunning." "And this," Marie continued, "is Mark." Mark extended his hand, and Mitchell shook it firmly, giving it a squeeze strong enough to make it clear who was the more dominant, and he clearly made his point. "Jessica," Marie went on in her usual enthusiastic tone, "come with me. I want to introduce you to someone." As Jessica followed Marie and Mitchell, Mark tried to tag along, but Marie paused and stopped him. "Mark, be a good sport and wait here, okay? I promise you'll see her again." Marie led Jessica to a corner of the room where a small group of people were chatting. Instead of joining them, she tapped a tall black man on the shoulder to get his attention. When he turned around, Jessica saw a very handsome man, probably in his early 30s, with an athletic build. He let his eyes slowly take in Jessica's appearance, which made her cheeks flush slightly. "James," Marie said. "This is my friend Jessica, the one I told you about. Jessica, this is James." James took Jessica's hand and gave it a warm squeeze. "Well, well, Marie," he said with a smile. "You didn't do this lady justice." "Nice to meet you, James," Jessica responded, suddenly feeling a warmth that she hoped wasn't visible on her face. "Would you mind looking after Jessica for a while? I need to free my husband from the circle for a few minutes." "Of course," James said, winking at Jessica. "She's in good hands with me." After Marie left, the tall Adonis led Jessica over to a love seat across the room and sat down next to her. Jessica could feel the warmth of his leg pressed against hers and took a sip of champagne to steady herself. "Where's your husband, Jessica?" he asked. "There he is, sitting by the door, keeping an eye on us," she answered. "I see. Mark can't seem to take his eyes off us. Why don't we give him something to think about?" "What do you mean?" Jessica asked, curious. James placed his right hand on the back of the couch behind Jessica and gently rested his other hand on her shoulder. His touch made her flinch slightly, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she crossed her legs and turned a bit more toward him. "I think we're going to get along just fine," he said with a smile, lightly stroking her shoulder. Jessica took another sip of champagne, feeling the tension in the air. Mark, meanwhile, was feeling uneasy. Everything seemed to be moving a little too fast. Deciding that if Jessica was going to get to know a stranger so quickly, he might as well do the same. He returned to the bar. Mark glanced around the room, but something felt off. James looked at Jessica with a sly smile. "I heard your husband might not fully grasp the rules of this place, is that right?" "Yes, it might be a bit of a shock for him," Jessica replied with a grin. "Well, I have a feeling you're going to fit in here just perfectly, Jessica, and I think you'll be very happy you came." "You think so?" she asked, her tone turning playful as she got into the spirit of the conversation. "Oh, absolutely, especially when we bring your husband on board. We should put a collar on him right from the start until he sorts out his concerns. I'm confident that by the end of the night, you'll be the happiest lady in the room." Jessica smiled. "Let's see." He slowly brought his face closer to hers, and Jessica knew exactly what was coming. The moment seemed to stretch out forever as his lips neared hers, and a flood of thoughts raced through her mind. How would Mark react? How would she react? Was this really going to happen? Did she even want this? The answer to that last question was a definite yes. Then his lips finally met hers. Despite the room being full of people, nothing else mattered in that moment. His gentle kiss only solidified her decision. When she felt his tongue lightly press against her lips, she immediately welcomed it, parting her lips to meet him. She moaned softly as she fully gave in to the kiss, pressing herself against him. There was no turning back now. Jessica felt a surge of desire, realizing that she was going to give herself to this man. When their kiss ended, Jessica was almost breathless from the overwhelming sensations coursing through her body. If he was as good at everything else as he was at kissing, she thought, then she was definitely in trouble. I think it's time I introduced you to what this club is all about, don't you think? What do you mean? Jessica asked, still catching her breath. I mean, he said with a sly smile, I think you should put this collar around your husband's neck and send him to sit in the circle. Jessica stood up and made her way over to Mark at the bar. Hey, honey, she said sweetly. Are you enjoying yourself? Am I enjoying myself? Well, I guess so, Mark replied, but there was a hint of bitterness in his voice. Don't be like that. We agreed to give this a try, remember? I hope you don't mind if I… She pulled the collar out of her pocket and reached up to place it around his neck. Honey, is this really necessary? Mark asked, uncertain. Shh, just turn around so I can fasten it. He complied, and soon heard the small lock click into place. I hope it's not too tight, Jessica added, trying to sound reassuring. But the strange feeling of the collar snapped Mark out of his daze. Suddenly, everything felt very wrong. He started to notice that there were far more men than women around, and the younger, fitter guys didn't seem to have any female counterparts. He also noticed that only men were sitting in the circle outside, while their wives and the young guys headed toward the stairs. Damn, he muttered under his breath. They're treating me like a fool. We're leaving. Jessica replied. What? We just got here and I want to spend some time with James. You knew what this was from the start. How long have you and Marie been planning to trick me into coming here? Just close your eyes. You just need to get used to the idea. I'm not going to get used to it. You'll get used to it. Tom and Bill did. We've both been with other people. This isn't any different. It's very different. This is about humiliation and disrespect, and you've already lied and schemed behind my back. I bet you and your new boyfriend were laughing at poor, naive Mark for offering up his wife. I don't know what Tom and Bill are thinking, but I'm not like them. You know I wouldn't agree to this, or you would have told me earlier. These parties are designed for married women. It's really nice that Tom and Bill are so supportive of Marie and Sarah. That's true dedication and confidence. It seems to me these parties are more about guys using married women for their own pleasure. That's ____. If you really love me, you'd let me do this, and we could continue our happy, supportive relationship. Jessica smiled triumphantly as she saw Mark's eyes drop in resignation. After what felt like an eternity, he looked back up into her eyes. That's the problem. I love you, and I thought you loved me. I'm leaving. As Mark headed for the door, James stepped in his path. Where do you think you're going? You can't leave until I give permission. Mark didn't respond. You should stay and watch a real man with your wife. Trust me. Once you see it, you'll realize you can't compete. We'll break the rules just this once and let you watch. Mark looked at Jessica, hoping for some sign of hesitation, a protest, anything, but there was nothing. He couldn't believe that this James guy assumed he could just take control of his wife like that, and what bothered him even more was that Jessica seemed to be going along with it, even enjoying it. Frustrated with himself and dismayed by Jessica's behavior, Mark turned to James. Are you planning to try and stop me? It might not be as easy as you think. When James hesitated, Mark simply walked out, expecting Jessica to follow him. Jessica's mind was racing. She knew she should leave with Mark, run after him, and try to fix things between them. Some of what he said made her feel uneasy, but she was also furious that he had embarrassed her in front of everyone. Why couldn't he be more like Tom? Even though she didn't think much of Tom, Sarah and Marie were suddenly at her side, chatting nonstop, reinforcing how unreasonable Mark was being. What she was asking for seemed perfectly reasonable. It wasn't hurting anyone. Jessica wasn't entirely convinced, but she stayed, listening to the flood of advice, and didn't follow him. James approached her. "Don't worry. Sometimes this is the initial reaction. He'll come around. Just give him a few hours to cool off. You can still enjoy yourself tonight, and you can deal with Mark tomorrow. Let's go upstairs." She hesitated, but then accepted his outstretched hand. A few minutes later, Jessica found herself standing in the center of the room, while James sat back in an armchair, eyeing the sexy wife who was about to become his. He always enjoyed the first time the most, and the tension from the argument only made it sweeter. He wondered how she would react when she saw him. Would she be scared or overwhelmed? Either way, he was certain she would be a convert by the end of the night, and he eagerly anticipated that moment. Jessica, meanwhile, tried to push thoughts of Mark out of her mind, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness at the idea of undressing in front of a stranger. She reached behind her and slowly unzipped her dress. She desperately wanted to make a good impression, though the fight had dampened some of her anticipation. She was still sure this was what she wanted. With a shrug, she let the top of her dress slide down to her waist, revealing a lavender bra that struggled to contain her breasts. "Oh, baby, you're making me very happy," James said with a grin. "I can already tell you and are going to get along just fine." A thought flashed through her mind that Mark had helped her pick out this dress. "Let's see the rest," James urged. At his words, Jessica let the dress fall to the floor. She stepped out of it, standing with her legs apart and her hands on her hips. James took in the sight of her garter belt, panties, and black stockings. Jessica reached behind her again, this time to unclasp her bra. She let it drop to the floor and cupped her breasts, as if offering them to James for his approval. "Come closer so I can get a better look," he said. Jessica walked over to him, standing between his spread legs. The sensations she was experiencing were overwhelming. This was only the beginning. She placed her hands on his head and pulled him toward her, but unwanted images of Mark kept flashing through her mind. James gently lowered Jessica to her knees. She could no longer maintain the confident facade she had before. James smiled as he unzipped his trousers. "I think you'll find it was worth it," he said with a seductive smile. "Go ahead, baby. Take what I'm offering." Jessica slowly reached out to him through the opening in his trousers. "Oh, God," she murmured. "Come on, baby, don't make me wait." In that moment, it felt like everything she had dreamed of. She tried to imagine what this would mean for her and her marriage. "Don't stop," James urged. He touched her head, signaling that the time for foreplay was over. He knew exactly what this attractive married woman needed. He relished the idea of being her first encounter with a real man. They both stood up, shedding the rest of their clothes. They kissed as they stood by the bed. Jessica couldn't help but compare it to Mark's kisses, but this one was purely physical, with no tenderness at all. They moved onto the bed together. "Please be gentle," Jessica pleaded. But James had no intention of being gentle. The pain was intense, much more than she expected. Jessica couldn't help but feel that maybe she deserved this for the way she had treated Mark. She tried to push thoughts of him out of her mind once again, becoming completely lost in the desire and the new sensations she was experiencing for the first time, even under these circumstances. A fleeting guilt towards her husband surfaced, but quickly faded away. Finally, they both relaxed in each other's arms. Something felt off, though, and the image of Mark suddenly flooded back into her mind, causing her to panic. Jessica stood up and began getting dressed quickly. James, watching her, suggested they take their time and go for another round. She didn't like the way he phrased it. It felt cheap and unrefined to her. She hurried to get dressed and returned to Mark. Embarrassment washed over her. The sex had been enjoyable, but it was more painful than she had anticipated. It wasn't as great as her friends had made it out to be. Maybe she just needed to adjust to the larger size. But Mark had ruined everything. If he hadn't left, she wouldn't have kept thinking about him. She hadn't expected to think about him at all tonight. This was supposed to be her night. James spoke again. "In 2 weeks, you and Mark will come to the next party." "Hope so," she replied, distracted. "If you run into any issues with him, reach out to me. I can come by, show him a new perspective, and help him see what's inevitable." Jessica left the room and ordered a taxi from the bar. On the ride home, she found herself looking forward to cuddling with her husband and slipping into their cozy, warm bed. Meanwhile, Mark had stormed out to his car. his world crumbling around him. Despite his anger, he waited a while before driving, partly to calm down, but mostly because he still hoped Jessica would follow him. Once again, he was let down by her choices. As he drove home, he tried not to think about what Jessica might be doing, and failed miserably. He suddenly realized the collar was still around his neck and tried to rip it off, but it wouldn't budge, filling him with shame. Why didn't he drag her out of there? Maybe he was a weakling. Maybe Jessica saw something in him that he didn't. His thoughts raced, desperately trying to find something coherent to hold on to. He forced himself to breathe and think clearly. This helped a bit. Calmer now, he started to consider his options: ignore, accept, or divorce. Until tonight, he had enjoyed their lifestyle. But now, he wondered, where should he even begin? Once home, Mark headed straight to his workshop and used wire cutters to remove the collar. Just looking at it made bile rise in his throat. He walked back to the kitchen and tossed it onto the bar counter. Then he went upstairs to gather his toiletries, clothes, and laptop. His camping gear was already packed and in the back of his truck, ready for a trip to the mountains if the weather was favorable that weekend. He always felt most at peace in the mountains, and that's where he needed to be now. It took him less than 10 minutes to get everything ready. As he was about to leave, he noticed Jessica's phone on the sideboard. She always forgot it, especially when they went out together. He pondered why she did this, and decided the phone might hold some clues. Knowing her password, he connected the phone to his laptop and downloaded data from the SIM card, including call history and text messages. It didn't take long. He put the phone back where he found it and walked out. When Jessica's taxi pulled up to the house, she noticed that all the lights were off. She figured Mark was probably pretending to be asleep and began to worry. As she stepped out of the taxi, she realized his truck was gone and she hurried inside. There were no messages, just the cut collar lying on the bar counter. No, she muttered to herself. He couldn't have actually left. Mark, in fact, had driven straight to the mountains, heading to one of the remote campsites he knew well. A few hours later, his phone started buzzing with calls and voice messages from Jessica. He ignored the calls but listened to all the messages without replying. The timing of her first call intrigued him, suggesting she had spent quite a bit of time at the party after he had left. Her messages that first night were filled with concern. Where was he? Was he okay? Couldn't they just talk? Mark took a break and called his parents, telling his mom that Jessica had done something hurtful, without going into specifics, and that he was fine and on his way to clear his head. "Oh, it must be serious if you're heading out there. Are you sure you're okay? Why don't you come home and we'll take care of you?" Mark smiled. "Thanks, Mom, but I need some time alone. Jessica might call you to ask where I am. Can you let her know I'm okay and that there's no need to involve the police? That would be helpful." "I won't say a word," she promised. She never liked Jessica, believing she was self-centered and too focused on herself rather than others. But Mark had never noticed this. Until now, perhaps. Mark arrived at the campsite late and quickly settled in, falling asleep from sheer exhaustion. The next morning, he set out on one of the long trails, immediately feeling the calming effect of wandering through the timeless mountain landscapes. There was something soothing about the mountains. They were constantly changing yet remained steadfast, untouched by human troubles, including his own. He spent the week exploring new trails and revisiting old favorites. Along the way, he met plenty of friendly people, often sharing food and drinks with them around the campsite. Most were married couples, people who, like him, cherished the great outdoors. Mark even suggested routes to some of the less experienced hikers, and a few joined him on his hikes and climbs. At times, he found himself enjoying the moment, only to be pulled back to reality by thoughts of his wife. He got along well with the campground owners, Pete and Jen, who invited him to a couple of barbecues. Initially, the farmers had started the campground as a way to stay financially afloat, but they genuinely enjoyed sharing their home with visitors. The place was perfect, rustic, and right in the heart of the park. Pete and Jen explained that the rustic appearance of the house was partly because they didn't want to sink their savings into renovations, and they preferred to do less rather than more work as they were getting older. Mark left a message at work requesting the vacation time he was entitled to, confident it wouldn't be an issue since he had already completed all the year-end accounts for his clients. Over the next few days, Jessica's messages became increasingly angry, demanding that he tell her where he was, insisting he come home, accusing him of acting childish and needing to grow up. Surprisingly, the small cafe near the campground had Wi-Fi, and Mark used it to transfer their savings into accounts in his name, just in case Jessica had any ideas. He doubted she would notice, not because of any newfound moral principles, but simply because she seemed absolutely certain he would come back. He left the checking account, where bills and spending money were deposited, untouched, so he doubted she would notice anything was amiss. A few days later, Mark decided to take a closer look at what he had downloaded from Jessica's phone. The calls seemed to be from her usual circle of friends, but the text messages were a real eye-opener. It was clear that the party had been planned for quite some time. Sarah and Marie were obviously the ringleaders, pushing the idea of more sex and complete control in their relationships. The messages were filled with talk about how they all deserved more. More control, more excitement, more sex, just more of everything. The way Tom and Bill had been reduced to submissive roles was held up as an example for Mark to follow. What struck him most was the complete lack of empathy for their husbands, with love being mentioned only as a way to justify their actions, or as a tool for gaining more control. Jessica's last few text messages to him had escalated to a level of anger that he found almost amusing. But there was no hint of remorse or apology. It was clear to him that he couldn't keep hiding forever, and needed to make some decisions. Jessica, on the other hand, was shocked that Mark had actually left, that he was serious when he said he was leaving. At first, she thought he meant just leaving the party, but now she wondered if he meant leaving home, or even leaving her. No, it's ridiculous, she told herself. He just needs time to cool off, and then he'll come back to me. The fact that his camping gear was missing meant he was likely on one of his little camping trips, playing Boy Scout. She called and texted him repeatedly, trying her best to sound like a concerned wife. And she was concerned, but she also hated not being able to control the situation. When he didn't return on Sunday night, she became irritated and reluctantly called Mark's mother. The response was icy, to say the least. His mother claimed not to know if he was okay or not, but mentioned that they had talked. When Jessica asked if they had discussed their little problem, she received a sharp, "No, but I'm sure you did something especially stupid." Jessica hung up, furious that Mark hadn't contacted her for a week. Sarah and Marie became semi-permanent fixtures in her house, advising her on what to do and what decisive actions to take when Mark returned. Mark was surprised when Tom called him and mentioned that he'd heard about his departure, asking if they could meet up with him and Bill. Mark initially suspected Jessica was behind this, but found himself curious about their marital situations too. Deciding it was time to return home, he agreed to meet them at a bar outside the city before heading back, insisting that the wives not be present. Sarah, of course, relayed all the details of the meeting to Jessica, also coaching Bill on the benefits of their new marital arrangement. Given the time and place of the meeting, Jessica suspected that Mark might be planning to come home afterward, and she began to prepare plans and options for his return. Mark ordered a beer and took it to the booth already occupied by Tom and Bill, greeting his friends. "Thanks, Mark, but I don't drink anymore," Bill objected. Mark raised an eyebrow. "Since when?" he asked, then couldn't resist adding, "Or is it since Sarah told you that you're not allowed?" Neither Bill nor Tom laughed. Mark found their reaction odd. They usually joked and laughed at each other's comments. Mark continued, "This might sound a bit strange, but just to be clear, none of you are recording this, right?" He noticed Bill fidgeting in his chair. "Are you serious? Sarah told me to leave my phone on," Bill admitted. "Turn it off or I'm leaving," Mark said, his voice filled with indignation. Bill reluctantly complied. "What's happened to you two? Are you really just doing everything they tell you?" Mark asked, incredulous. Tom lowered his head. "I think so, but Marie says it's for the best. She says it sets clear boundaries and reduces conflict. We don't argue anymore. There are no secrets, everything's out in the open, and she's much happier." "What are you saying? Do you even get a say in anything?" Bill tried to step in. "Mark, it's not as bad as you think. I actually enjoy watching Sarah with other guys. It turns me on. Honestly, without these parties, she might have started an affair on the side, and that could have led to us breaking up. I really don't want that. I love my life, and I'm lucky to have someone as hot as Sarah. This isn't for me. I can almost handle watching it, but what's with the collars, the circle, And the way those guys act, it's terrifying. Do you really like it? To be honest, Tom said, not really. The circle is pretty humiliating, and it would be better if the guys weren't so much like jerks, Mark finished. And I don't mind. It's just the reality of the situation. Watching them might change your perspective on this, Mark. Honestly, they're like ____ machines. We just can't compete with them. When I think about it from Sarah's point of view, I can understand why she's into it. I don't think she'll be able to go back to the way things were, Bill said. Mark was taken aback. What? She can't go back even if it's at your expense? Do you get anything out of this? Yes, we still do the same things, but sex is different now and it's just sex. She's not in love with any of these guys. So, are you still intimate with Sarah? Well, yeah, I am. It's just a little different now. She gets her pleasure, but we're still close. And you think this is okay? The conversation continued, leaving Mark more perplexed with each passing moment. To be honest, guys, I just don't get it. It's so one-sided. It's not love, not for anyone. I think you need to see some of the text messages I have on my laptop. Mark showed them some of the worst messages he'd found on Jessica's phone. At first, he thought they might refuse to look, but they started reading. The extent of the derogatory comments made by all three wives was shocking. Mark expected them to react with anger, but all he got were shrugs and the consensus that it was just more than what they were used to. Well, I give up, Mark sighed. I guess we're just wired differently. Look, it was good seeing you. Take care of yourselves, and I sincerely hope things work out for you. But I've got some things to take care of. As soon as Mark left, Bill called Sarah to let her know he was on his way home. Mark drove back to his house, and when he walked in, Jessica was clearly waiting for him, having put in the time and effort to look her best. He had to admit she looked great, and he realized he had missed her. Finally, the wandering traveler returns, Jessica said with a smile. I missed you too, honey. Jessica's first outburst was all about the lack of contact from Mark during his time away, which he figured was her way of trying to catch him off guard and make him feel guilty. It didn't matter to him, so he didn't respond. Jessica was clearly frustrated that he didn't see how unacceptable his actions were. But eventually, she dropped the subject. When there was a lull in the conversation, Mark asked, Was it everything you imagined? Jessica smiled. Yes, it was absolutely amazing. If you want, I can tell you all about it. I've heard that husbands like to relive it and hear all the dirty details. I'm not interested. I just wanted you to confirm your betrayal, which you just did. Jessica pouted, disappointed by his response. This is actually hard to explain since you didn't participate as part of a couple. It was something for me, and it wouldn't have affected us at all, or it wouldn't have if you hadn't stormed out in anger. Just then, a car pulled up outside. Mark was stunned to see Marie, Sarah, and James getting out. What's wrong with you and your co-conspirators, Jessica? Mark asked, incredulous. I can't believe you're dragging me into this again. Didn't you learn anything from last time? All three of them walked right into the house, which only fueled Mark's anger. James sat down arrogantly while Marie and Sarah started to scold Mark. He barely listened, catching bits about how upset Jessica was, about the benefits of their arrangement, about how sexually satisfied wives were incredibly happy wives, and how Jim and Bill couldn't be happier. Mark cut in. Are you sure about that? It seems to me you've manipulated them without even bothering to ask how they feel. You withheld sex to get your way. I can't fathom why you'd treat anyone like that, let alone the people you claim to love. But congratulations, you succeeded in humiliating the men you supposedly care about. None of this is true. You won't understand until you see James and Jessica together, Sarah snapped. That's not going to happen, Mark replied firmly. James stood up, looking smug, and sauntered over to Jessica, wrapping his arm around her waist. Listen, Mark, if you're not into collars and humiliation, we can work out something else. She can become a regular here. I'll take care of her and keep things civilized. Everybody wins. Now why don't we head upstairs, and you'll realize that Jessica doesn't really have much of a choice. You need to get out of my house, Mark said, his voice steady but cold. James responded with a self-satisfied grin. Tell you what, why don't I call Mike and invite him over right now? We'll make it a party, and you'll get the added bonus of seeing Sarah and Marie naked. There's nothing hotter than watching a married woman submit. As James began dialing on his cell phone, Mark took 2 swift steps forward, lowering his hip and shoulder, and added force to the punch that landed squarely on James's face. Screams erupted from the women as James stumbled back, clutching his nose, blood trickling down his hand. A sharp pain shot through Mark's fist, but he ignored it, adrenaline surging through his veins. Luckily, James fell but was still trying to move. As he started to get up, Mark delivered a powerful kick to his groin. This time, James collapsed to the floor, writhing in agony. "Sorry, ladies," Mark said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "but it looks like the gangbang is canceled, and your stud is going to be out of commission for a while." The women's screams and shouts were deafening, but Mark remained composed. He grabbed James and dragged him to the door, with Marie and Sarah trailing behind, yelling in protest. Mark shoved James into his car, ignoring his groans and muttered curses. As he turned back to the house, Marie and Sarah stood there, wide-eyed and speechless. "Get out," Mark commanded, his voice cold and unyielding. "And don't ever come back." Marie and Sarah hesitated, but the fury in Mark's eyes sent them quickly toward the door. Mark followed them out, then turned to Jessica, who stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "You too," Mark said firmly, "but I live here. I can't leave. We need to figure this out. This isn't what I wanted. I love you, Mark," Jessica pleaded, her voice breaking. Mark frowned. "Oh, so it's all fine because you love me? Do you really think you'll be safe if you stay? Shouldn't you go with your friends?" "Of course, I'll be safe. You would never harm me." "Maybe not, but with what I'm feeling for you right now, even I'm not sure. I'll leave, but only for a few hours until you calm down." "Just go away," Mark said, his tone weary and resigned. He watched them leave, and as the door closed behind them, he felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, relief, and surprisingly, a sense of calm. He had anticipated Sarah and Marie showing up, but James had been an unwelcome surprise. He smiled at the memory of the punch and how quickly it had shattered James's smug demeanor. It occurred to him that James might file an assault report, but Mark figured James's pride would likely prevent that. The whole scene only solidified Mark's resolve. He went to his truck, grabbed new locks, and started installing them on all the exterior doors. It turned out to be easier than expected since they were the same size and brand as the existing ones. He then reprogrammed the garage door and security system. Afterward, he loaded, or rather tossed, Jessica's clothes into her car, and then settled down in his workshop to enjoy a cold beer. Jessica returned at 7 o'clock in the evening, alone, but found she couldn't get into the house. Her key didn't work, which puzzled her. Surely he wouldn't have changed the locks, would he? She tried the back door and the garage, but when none of those worked, she began pounding furiously on the door until Mark finally answered. He opened the door just wide enough to speak. "Your things are in the car," he said, then quickly closed the door again. Jessica started knocking and screaming, drawing the attention of the neighbors. As her shouts continued, Mark approached the door once more. "Unless you want me to tell all your precious neighbors what you've been up to, you'd better leave," he warned, looking angrier than Jessica had ever seen him. "We need to talk." "I think I misjudged the situation," Jessica said, her voice shaky. "You think so?" Mark replied, his tone flat. "Don't be sarcastic. I listened to Sarah and Marie too much and completely misjudged the situation. I really thought you'd be on board. Maybe even happy about it." "Anything else?" Mark asked, his voice cold and detached. "I love you, and I want us to stay together. We can't just throw everything away over something so trivial." "The most interesting thing is that you haven't apologized," Mark said. "I'm sorry I hurt you, but not I'm sorry I had sex with another guy. You're just sorry things didn't go the way you planned. You still think what you did was reasonable. You're so self-absorbed, it's astonishing. You seem to confuse manipulation and control with love. Well, now you're free to seek all the excitement you deserve. Good luck with that." Jessica began to panic, realizing for the first time just how much she was risking. How could she have been so wrong? She begged, "I don't want this. I want you, us, everything to be like it was. Please forgive me. I'll do anything. You've always treated me so well, maybe too well. And I took it for granted. It's too late. There's no going back. Let's say I could forgive the sex, but I can't forgive the betrayal, and I'll never be able to trust you again. I think you should leave now. This isn't the end. I know you still love me. I'll bring you back," Jessica said, her voice trembling with desperation. Mark walked her to the door and closed it behind her, feeling as though he was closing the door on a significant chapter of his life. He decided not to pursue a divorce right away, and Jessica didn't file either, repeatedly trying to win him back, which suited Mark just fine. It meant she was putting on a show. He didn't think she could keep up the act forever. He was surprised when she agreed to sell the house, guessing she was desperate for money. Mark quit his job and transitioned to freelance accounting while working as a mountain guide. He completed all the necessary training courses, which also helped him build a network of contacts. His true passion was the outdoors, and he knew how to share that passion with his clients. During the spring and summer seasons, he spent most of his time in the mountains and planned to take on more serious winter climbs. He felt healthier and fitter than ever. He bought a 50% share of the camp from Pete and Jen, the couple who owned it. The camp didn't bring in much profit, so once he invested more into it, most of his money, he'd consider divorce again. After all, being an accountant had its advantages. Mark had big plans to expand the camp. He wanted to double the number of campsites, organize guided holiday trips, and create mountain bike trails. Pete and Jen's daughter Carol kept horses as a hobby, and they believed that offering riding holidays could be lucrative. Mark really liked Carol, who had moved back in with her parents after a painful divorce. She was caring, attentive, and always upbeat. She was also thrilled that Mark was involved, as it eased the burden on her parents. They spent a lot of time working together, and the more Mark got to know her, the more he liked her. Plus, she was beautiful, which didn't hurt. Looking back, Mark realized he hadn't been happy in his previous job, but it was profitable and made Jessica happy. If he thought about it, he had done a lot of things just to make her happy. Perhaps that party was the best thing that could have happened, though certainly not in the way Jessica had intended. Surprisingly, in mid-August, Tom showed up at the camp. He and Marie had separated. Mark gave him a few odd jobs around the camp, and Tom stayed for a few months, looking fitter and happier, more like the guy Mark had known in the beginning. Tom mentioned that Jessica had stopped socializing with Sarah and Marie, and because she didn't have a partner, she couldn't return to the parties, even if she wanted to. James never got in touch again. After ignoring Jessica's calls, texts, and emails for a while, she eventually showed up at the camp and asked to speak with Mark so politely that he couldn't refuse. Many of the words were the same as before, but this time, it seemed like she was genuinely sorry. He noticed she used the word I much less and talked more about his feelings. She revealed that she had been seeing a counselor in an attempt to get help. The counselor had asked her to see things from Mark's perspective, and she admitted that she had taken him for granted and become selfish. They talked for a long time, bringing all their issues to the surface. Mark could tell that Jessica was beginning to hope they could work things out after all. He turned to her. "You broke something that can't be fixed, Jessica. No matter how much you want it, I can't live with this mistrust. In the end, it would destroy us both." She was about to object when he added, "Besides, I've met someone,